It's 8 a.m., November 11th, 1918. Word is filtered down from higher headquarters that the armistice has been signed. The fighting will stop at 11 a.m. You've made it through the most horrific war the world has ever seen. Just keep your head down, don't do anything stupid, and you can go home and live the rest of your life in peace. That is what went through every soldier's mind on the Western Front when they heard the news of the signing of the armistice. However, what went through the minds of the Allied generals was something very different. Colonel Thomas Goenlock served as an intelligence officer in the American 1st Division. He was on the front line that morning and remembers the radio message that came through to the division. As told in the story Armistice, the end of World War I, 1918, website Eyewitness to History, Goenlock was with his fellow officers. The official radiogram stated, Paris, 6:01 a.m., November 11th, 1918. Marshal Foch to the Commander-in-Chief. 1. Hostilities will be stopped on the entire front beginning at 11 a.m., November 11th, French hour. Allied troops will not go beyond the line reached at that hour on that date until further orders. Signed, Marshal Foch, 5:45 a.m. Whether it was the indifference to killing or not wanting to let up the pressure on German troops, Ferdinand Foch, Supreme Allied Commander, refused the German delegates Matthias Erzberger's immediate request to declare a ceasefire of truce during the negotiations so that there would not be any more useless waste of lives among the common soldiers. But Foch, the fighting was going to go on until 11 a.m. that day that the armistice was signed. When Foch sent out orders announcing the armistice, nothing in the orders indicated all offensive action was to cease immediately. Allied generals had wide latitude in interpreting Foch's orders. For the next 5 hours, the killings continued. General Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Force, he wasn't happy about the armistice. He wanted to push the Germans all the way back into Germany. He felt that unless we pushed the German army back onto its own soil and crushed it, the Germans would believe they were never defeated, and we would have to do this all over again in 20 years. Rather pathetic as we did. Pershing also doubted the Germans' good faith. He stated in his testimony to the House Committee on Military Affairs on November 5, 1919, when the subject of the armistice was under discussion, we didn't know what the purpose of it was definitively, whether it was something proposed by the German High Command to gain time, or whether they were sincere in their desire to have an armistice. And the mere discussion of an armistice would not be sufficient grounds for any judicious commander to relax his military activities. Kind of makes sense. Pershing's decision to continue the hostilities to the last minute cost 3,500 American casualties on the last day of the war, 320 of them being deaths. Two of Pershing's subordinate commanders, General Charles Summerall, commander of 5th Corps, and General William Wright, commander of the 89th Division, which was also part of the 5th Corps, gave orders to continue the attacks until 11 a.m., at which point the men were to dig in and hold all ground gained. Why did these commanders order men to their death when they knew the war would be over in a few hours? Was it hubris? Was it a sound military strategy? Was it one last chance to obtain glory? Who were these two men who knowingly sent men to die during the last hours of World War I? Well, Charles Perlott Summerall was born on March 4th, 1867 in Blount's Ferry, Florida. He attended the Porter Military Academy from 1882 to 1885. He taught English for 3 years, and in 1888 he was accepted to the United States Military Academy at West Point, graduating in 1892. Summerall's career in the Army followed the typical path of most Army officers of that time period. He served in China and the Philippines and numerous stateside commands, as well as attending the numerous Army professional schools. By 1917, he was a full colonel in the regular Army. When the U.S. entered World War I, Summerall was promoted to brigadier general. He was considered an excellent commander. General Pershing wrote of him, Major General Charles Summerall, whose loyalty and distinguished service as brigade, division, corps commander during the Allied operations of the American Expeditionary Force in the World War will ever remain the pride of his associates and will ever mark him as one of the outstanding figures of that great struggle. Theodore Roosevelt Jr. stated, General Summerall was the biggest troop leader we had in the American Army. A war correspondent, Thomas Johnson, stated his officers and men worshiped him. However, Summerall was an aggressive commander who was not affected by battle casualties. Now, General William Wright, he was born September 24, 1863 in Newark, New Jersey, the son of a career Army officer. He entered West Point in 1882, but resigned in December of that year due to his inability to pass his exams. Some facts state it was his math that he couldn't do. Wright entered the Army through New Jersey National Guard in December 1882 and was appointed a second lieutenant in the regular in 1885 over the objection of Secretary of War Robert Todd Lincoln. Now, he also progressed through the Army school, served in Cuba during the Spanish-American War, served in the Philippines during the Philippine-American conflict. When war broke out, Wright was promoted to Brigadier General. He served as commander of the 35th Division, 3rd Corps, 5th Corps, 7th Corps, and at the time of the Armistice, Wright was in command of the 89th Division, which was in the 5th Corps. He was to take over I Corps in a few days. Now, when Pershing was informed of the Armistice, he did not send out orders to his commanders to cease offensive action and maintain positions. He did not send out any orders. In fact, he gave no instructions to his commanders to suspend any new offensive action during the remaining hours until 11 a.m. So his subordinate commanders could justify continuing the attacks until 11 a.m. You see, an armistice is not an end to a war. It's only a truce for a certain period of time, in this case 30 days. However, the terms of the armistice were so harsh that the Germans could not have resumed offensive actions in 30 days. Now, the Meuse-Argonne offensive had been underway since September 26, 1918. This offensive is still considered the largest battle the United States military has ever fought. A total of 1,200,000 men fought in this battle. The casualties up to the morning of November 11th were approximately 92,286 wounded in action and 25,957 killed in action. By the early morning of the 11th, the word about the armistice was spread throughout the lines, up and down the troops on both sides of the trenches. Each man was thinking of going home and picking up their lives. They only had to keep their heads down and wait a few more hours, but that was not to be. General Summerall, interpreting his orders to continue fighting until 11 a.m., ordered his 5th Corps to attack across the Meuse River. In his article, November 11th, Wasted Lives on Armistice Day, in the Army Times, Joseph Persico quotes Summerall's final words to his officers the night before the armistice was signed. "Only by increasing the pressure can we bring about the enemy's defeat. Get into action and get across. I don't expect to see any of you again, but that doesn't matter. You have the honor of a definitive success. Give yourself that." And with those uplifting words, he sent his men across the Meuse River into certain death, all the while knowing the armistice was going to happen sometime on the 11th of November. Now, Private Elton Mackin, experienced that day as part of the 5th Marine Regiment, is told in Joe Persico's article, November 11th, Wasted Lives on Armistice Day. The Marines reached the river's edge where the Army engineers had placed a rickety pontoon bridge across the river. The Marines saw the dead bodies of the engineers who had been killed setting up that bridge. A major blew his whistle and stepped onto the bridge. As the men crowded behind him, the pontoons began to sink below the water, sloshing about their ankles. The engineers shouted to them to space themselves before the bridge span collapsed. As the Marines made their way across the bridge, German artillery came raining down upon them. The German machine gunners opened up. The attacking Marines were cut down instantly. It was a shooting gallery. Elton Mackin survived that last day of the war. Many of his buddies did not. Private Henry Gunther was not so lucky. He was a member of the 79th Infantry Division and was killed at 10:58 a.m. Gunther's squad approached a roadblock of 2 machine guns in the village of Chaumont-Devant-Dembillers. Gunther got up against the orders of his close friend and now Sergeant Ernest Powell and charged with his bayonet. The German soldiers tried to wave him away. They knew the armistice would take effect in a minute or two. They kept trying to wave Gunther away. He just kept going and fired a shot or two. When he got too close to machine gunners, he was shot in a short burst of automatic rifle fire and killed instantly. The story behind Gunther's suicidal attack that day concerns a letter he sent home telling a friend to do whatever he could to stay out of this mess. The Army censors decided this was disloyal, reported the contents of the letter to Gunther's commanding officer. Gunther was reduced in rank from sergeant to private. The theory is that he wanted to prove he was a loyal American. Well, the Army posthumously restored Gunther's rank to sergeant. That same morning, General William Wright ordered his men to attack the town of Stenay, which was across the river from the 89th Division. Stenay was located on a hill on the east side of the Meuse River. The 89th had crossed the river on rickety pontoon bridges similar to those used by the 5th Marines with similar results. The town was occupied by a large number of German infantry. The machine gunners, the artillery rifles, and snipers took their toll on the men of the 89th. They were able to take the town of Stenay, but at a cost of 61 men killed, 304 wounded. There have been a number of reasons given for the attack to take place. One reason put forth, General White did not want the Germans to occupy the town after the armistice took effect, because Wright intended to make use of the town's bathhouses and other public works, given the amount of time his dirty troops had gone so long without baths or showers. That's ridiculous. The problem with this rationale is that the Germans, under the terms of the armistice, were required to evacuate all French and Belgian territory immediately. Another reason offered by White in his testimony before Congress was that commanders had not been informed how long the armistice would be in effect. So he and other commanders continued with already planned attacks in order to improve their tactical position, so that they could operate from a position of advantage if hostilities resumed. The third reason given was the fact that Stenay was one of the few towns in the area with large buildings still standing and could be used for quartering troops. The town of Stenay was taken at a cost of 365 wounded and 61 dead. The total cost of the Meuse-Argonne offensive would be 95,786 wounded, 26,277 killed in action, 320 of which should not have happened. When the soldiers of the AAF and the families of the soldiers killed on the last day of the war learned that American commanders ordered these attacks, knowing the war would be over in a few hours, they demanded a congressional investigation. Now, the House of Representatives Committee on Military Affairs had convened a Committee on War Expenditures on November 5, 1919. General John Pershing, commander of the AAF, was testifying as to the AEF's efficiency during the war, when Representative Alvin T. Fuller of Massachusetts asked a question that many of constituents wanted an answer to. Quote, "I would like to ask General Pershing if American troops were ordered over the top on the other side on the morning of the day when, under the terms of the armistice, firing was to cease, and that those troops who were not killed or wounded marched peacefully into Germany at 11 o'clock. Is that true?" Pershing responded, in part was, "When the subject of the armistice was under discussion and we did not know what the purpose of it was definitively, whether it was something promised by the German High Command to gain time, or whether they were sincere in their desire to have an armistice, and the mere discussion of an armistice would not be sufficient grounds for any judicious commander to relax his military activities." Yeah. Well, in response to a letter query, and a later query letter from Fuller, Pershing stated he was simply following the orders of his superior, Marshal Ferdinand Foch, Commander-in-Chief of the Allied forces in France, issued on November 9th, to keep up the pressure against the retreating enemy until the ceasefire went into effect. Consequently, he had not ordered his army to stop fighting. Due to the demand for a congressional investigation into the events on Armistice morning, House of Representatives Military Affairs Committee convened Subcommittee Number 3, which on December 16, 1919 began interviewing Generals Fox Connor, General William Wright, and General Robert Bullard. Now, General White's testimony is interesting. He stated, "The situation was this. We did not know what the terms of the armistice were, whether the armistice was going to last 24 hours or 48 hours or a month. It was absolutely necessary for me to drive forward and get the ground which dominated the right bank of the stream, if I was going to supply my troops on the right bank of the stream." Representative Bland asked General Wright, "Did you get that ground?" Wright's response, "I came very near it. I came within a kilometer of it." All the commanders knew of the armistice and when it would take effect. They knew it was going to last until a peace treaty was signed. Germany was beaten, and an armistice of 24, 48 hours, or even a month would not have helped the Germans build up for an attack. Why did these generals launch these attacks? on Armistice Day? Was it their last chance to add another victory streamer to the unit's record, or was it more about personal gains than strategic gains? There were some officers who understood the tactical situation, who ignored attack orders and stayed put, waiting for 11 a.m. Their men's lives were more important than glory. The outcome of the hearing was disappointing. General Pershing would be appointed to the top Army position of Army Chief of Staff. General Summerall would follow him into that position of Chief of Staff of the United States Army in November of 1926. General Wright served as an executive assistant to Peyton C. March, the Chief of Staff of the United States Army. Then in 1922, he was assigned to command the Department of the Philippines until his retirement in 1923. The final report of the subcommittee, number 3, held no one personally accountable for the losses on November 11, 1918, and no satisfactory reason was given as to why an attack was given and 320 men died during the last 6 hours of World War I. This is our history. This is our heritage. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and ring the bell. I post a new video every 2 weeks.